Hello, my online learners, and welcome to the respiratory system. It's pretty straightforward, but it does have a few tricky parts. So, it's a gas. The respiratory system has a primary function of transporting oxygen from the environment to get it into your blood, into your bloodstream, and then oxygen is needed by your cells and your organs. Please also realize its job is also to get out carbon dioxide, because it's actually the carbon dioxide in your body that regulates your breathing rate. Did you know that your respiratory system moves 1,200 quarts, which is about 1,200. It's about 11,000 liters, because a liter is about a quart, per day, in and out of your lungs, and it does it without you thinking. The respiratory system also very important because it removes waste such as carbon dioxide from your system, because it's the buildup of carbon dioxide in your body that will change your blood pH, which can become very toxic. Okay, so we're going to look at a bunch of different things and a bunch of different words. Go over these. A lot of them, a little too much detail that we need to know, but alveoli is important, bronchioles. Notice there's that oles again, which means little. So bronchi is a branch and bronchioles is a little one, just like raviolis are little meat pies. Capillaries, cilia, diaphragm is important. We're not going to look at diseases. Erythropoiesis is another one. Erythro is red blood cells, poiesis is making. So that is the process of your body telling another part of your body, your bone marrow, to make blood cells. Eustachian tube, we talked about that when we talked about the ear, glottis, larynx. Lingual is just a fancy word for saying tongue side. Mediastinum, that is a membrane around it. We've talked before when we've talked about the brain, the medulla oblongata. That's where the respiratory center is. Nasal pharynx, oral pharynx are just part of the pharynx. To get picky, there's different tonsils. The pleura we're going to look at. That is an important membrane. Surfactant is an important chemical. We're going to look at that. Trachea, ventilation, and the visceral pleura. Remember, anytime we're talking about membranes, we talk about a visceral side, which is towards the gut, and a peritoneal side, which is the, where's peritoneal pleura? Parietal pleura, which is towards the outside. Okay. Important thing, cellular respiration, which is a process of making ATP, is dependent on oxygen. If we don't have oxygen, we don't make efficient energy. And then actually, did you know that too much oxygen will produce those nasty free radicals that they talk about? So all this barrier, if you're ill, you're supposed to breathe in high concentration oxygen. High concentrations of oxygen can be toxic because it makes too many superoxides and free radicals. Just a little FYI, because you don't have enough to learn. Anyway. Oxygen reacts with glucose to produce carbon dioxide and water, and that carbon dioxide is toxic if it's allowed to build up in your bloodstream, because it will affect the pH of your blood, and if you change the pH too much, it will affect the proteins in your blood. Just a little FYI for you. The respiratory system is very closely related to the cardiovascular system because you get oxygen into your blood and then your blood pumps around. Your respiratory system is also linked with your urinary system when we don't talk about that. When it comes to getting rid of or acid-base buildup, we talk about it really briefly. We'll talk more about it in anatomy, but if the carbon dioxide builds up, carbon dioxide and pH can actually be controlled, or pH of your blood can be controlled by your kidneys. So if one goes, the other can be affected. Okay. You have two lungs, and the left side has only 2 lobes because your heart's there. The right side has 3 lobes. There's upper, middle, and lower pathways here. It's just a lot of divisions. Basically, your whole respiratory system is a bunch of tubes to get air to your alveoli, and it's only in those little end sacs where it's thin enough for diffusion to take place. And it's basic diffusion, moving by what's called a concentrate or a partial pressure. So concentration is a term for particles in liquid. When you're talking about gases, partial pressure is a similar term for concentration, but it's in gases. So you have your terminal air sacs called alveoli, which is surrounded by a network of capillaries, and that allows for gas exchange. Then you have your thoracic cage, which houses your rib cage. It houses, it protects, it facilitates your breathing. And this is why, I don't know if you've ever broken a rib, it hurts to breathe. And you have two sets of muscles to breathe. So inside your ribs, you have muscles. I don't know if you've ever noticed when you're eating ribs. If not, get some ribs and look at them. You'll see there's two layers of muscle and they cross each other. One goes this way and one goes this way. So this way you have your intercostals, or external, and your internal. One will, one contracts the rib cage and brings it up, and the other forces it down in forced expiration. Okay, let's look at the parts. Pretty basic. You've got, hopefully you know most of these. So you got your nasal cavity, and they call these nares or nostrils. In your nasal cavity, you have hair, and that hair actually serves as a purpose to trap dirt. So you have hair, you have mucus to trap dirt, and you also have a really good blood supply, because the whole idea of your nose is to warm, moisten, and clean that air to keep your lungs healthy. Then when your air from your nose joins the area from your mouth, you have your pharynx. Then afterwards, you have your larynx, and your larynx is your voice box. And the way I remember that is la 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 larynx. So you're singing, and then so you sing with your larynx. That's what I was doing when I was doing la la la. So then you have your larynx, and after the larynx, which is the voice box, you have a tube called the trachea. And this is a very unique tube in that it's got cartilage around it. Now, if you feel up and down on your neck, you can feel that cartilage right about here. And that cartilage helps keep your windpipe open so that it doesn't collapse and stick to each other. Very important, you got to keep it open to have air going up and down. Now here's a cross section of the trachea, and you'll see that you've got these C-shaped rings, and they're not all the way through, so that way your esophagus, which is on this side, so if you swallow a big something or other, it will kind of have some expansion room. Then you have some muscle layer, you have some epithelium, and on your epithelium you have ciliated cells, and this is, notice this is columnar, if you want to just look at cells. You will see that there's cilia on it to help brush dirt back up again. And yeah, you got your cartilage. Don't worry about the other stuff, just cartilage, cilia, airspace. And then when your tubes branch, they go into bronchi, bronchus. Bronchus is one, bronchi is plural. And then they divide and they divide and they divide into bronchioles and terminal bronchiole. And then you get all the way to what are called alveoli. And alveoli are these very small grape-like sacs. And this is where the gas exchange can take place, because these are thin enough. There's no cartilage, there's no thick supportive tissue. You just have your alveoli, which is your thin lung material, and then you have this excellent blood supply around it. And by basic diffusion, the oxygen goes into the blood, and then by basic diffusion, the carbon dioxide will come out. And it's all based on partial pressure, which is a fancy way for saying concentration gradient of gases. Okay? So air contains many gases, predominantly nitrogen. So the air you breathe is actually about 70 some odd % nitrogen. Oxygen makes up only 21% of the oxygen we breathe, and then there's a small part of all the other stuff. Just, you don't need to know that. Just realize that you're not breathing in straight oxygen, because breathing in straight oxygen can be hazardous. Now, this nitrogen can be hazardous if you are deep sea diving, because it forms the bends, but Just so you know, about 21% of the oxygen is what you breathe in. Now, you have a process called ventilation. Ventilation is in and out. So when you take air in, it's inspiration. Expiration is putting it out. And ventilation is in and out. And realize it's like a sack. So you never get all of the air out of the alveoli. So there's always a little dead space at the bottom. Okay? So respiration is the process of gas exchange in which oxygen is added to the blood, carbon dioxide is removed. The movement from the alveoli to the blood is called external respiration because it's happening external to the body, if you think the fact that the lungs are still touching the outside. And then from moving the blood from the oxygen from the blood to the cells is internal respiration because it's happening inside your body. I'm not sure why the textbook makes this sound like it's so tricky, but because this is actually not really in your body yet, because it's external and internal respiration. Now, when it comes to getting the respiration in, or the process of respiration, are we there yet? What is our made of respiration is external. Let's talk about the parts. We'll talk about the mechanism. What I want you to pay attention to is the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is the big muscle that separates your chest cavity, your thoracic cavity, from your abdominal cavity. And it will move up and down during or causing ventilation. Good. This is wrong. The largest source of oxygen is not the Amazon. It's actually the ocean. There's a lot of diatoms. Anyway, whatever. You don't need to know other than stop burning the rainforest down. Also, be nice to your oceans. Oxygen. We have enough oxygen to last between 4 and 6 minutes. I don't know if as a kid you tried to hold your breath until you passed out. The fact that you have a system that when you pass out it forces you to breathe again, it's kind of a protective mechanism. So the respiratory system is a bunch of branching tubes, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller from the bronchus to the alveoli to the bronchioles, and they end in the alveoles or alveoles. Kind of rhymes with raviolis. Raviolis are little meat pies. Bronchioles are little bronchi, little tubes, and they still have the cartilage on them. And alveoli are surrounded by capillaries, and they're only a single cell thick, and this is the interface where gas exchange takes place. Okay, so the function of the airways of getting all those paths in, such as your nose, is to heat your air, filter your air, humidify it, smell things to make sure that you're okay, a little sound, and a little ventilation. So as we go down, you have your nasal cavity. Then there's a bunch of terms here. You don't need to know them. Realize your tongue takes up a big space. And then they join in the pharynx. And then you have your vocal cords. So the vocal cords is at the top of the larynx, and as you breathe, the sound goes through the vocal cords. I just want you to realize that there are vocal cords. You don't need to know all the terms. I do want you to be aware of the term epiglottis, because epiglottis, we'll talk more of it in the digestive system, but as you swallow, your tongue pushes on this and blocks your airway, so this way you don't get food in your air tube, which is important. Then you have your vocal cords here, and your vocal cords make sound by vibrating it. Just a little FYI. We don't need to know much detail on it. Okay, so in the nose, we talked about you breathe through your nose. It's, we don't care about the different parts of it. The reason you breathe through your nose is because, there it is, the air is warmed and moistened, and that helps keep your lung healthy. Okay, I will have to go to video number 2 because the free video system I use is only 15 minutes. So stay tuned for the excitement of the respiratory system.